Namaskar, hello and welcome viewers. You're watching this special presentation of Sansad TV, Baatcheet, where an Honourable Member of Parliament will interview Honourable Union Minister. And joining us today are two very special guests. Please welcome External Affairs Minister of the country, Dr. S. Jaishankar. Welcome, sir. He is a member of the Upper House of Parliament from the state of Gujarat. He was Foreign Secretary from 2015 to 2018.
30th May 2019. Dr. S. Jaishankar was sworn in as the Cabinet Minister in the second term of the Modi government.
I, Subramaniam Jaishankar, do swear in the name of God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of India as by law established, and I will uphold the sovereignty and integrity of India, that I will faithfully and conscientiously discharge my duties as a Minister for the Union, and that I will do right to all manner of people in accordance with the Constitution and the law, without fear or favour, affection or ill will.
He was made the Minister of External Affairs on 31st of May 2019. He is the first former Foreign Secretary to head the Ministry of External Affairs as the Cabinet Minister and second ever diplomat to be appointed as India's External Affairs Minister after Natwar Singh. Joining the Indian Foreign Service in 1977, Dr. Jaishankar has represented India's interests and fostered friendly working relationships in countries around the world. He has been the longest serving Indian ambassador to China. He has also served in other diplomatic assignments in embassies in Moscow, Colombo, Budapest, Tokyo, as well as in the Ministry of External Affairs and the President's Secretariat. He also served as President, Global Corporate Affairs at Tata Sons Private Limited in 2018. Dr. Jaishankar is a graduate of St. Stephen's College at the University of Delhi. He has a Master's in Political Science and an MPhil and PhD in International Relations from Jawaharlal Nehru University. For the career diplomat turned politician who was inducted into the Union Cabinet, this is the second term in the Rajya Sabha for him.
Dr. S. Jaishankar, delighted to have you on Sansad TV.
Very happy to be here.
Let's also welcome Dr. Sasmit Patra, BJD MP. He is also leader of the Biju Janata Dal Parliamentary Party in the Rajya Sabha.
From effectively raising issues of regional and national importance in Parliament to firmly advocating India's stance at global forums, Dr. Sasmit Patra has utilized every opportunity to focus on legislative, deliberative and developmental roles. Since 28th of June 2019, he is a member of the Parliament of India, representing the state of Odisha in the Upper House, and was appointed as the Chief Whip of the party.
Sasmit Patra.
He is currently spokesperson of the Biju Janata Dal. He was renominated to the Upper House by Biju Janata Dal for the second time in May 2022.
Dr. Patra, glad to have you on Sansad TV. Over to you. Let's get ready for this very meaningful conversation between the Honourable Minister and Honourable Parliamentarian. Dr. Patra.
We are privileged to have with us Dr. S. Jaishankar, the Foreign Minister of the world's largest democracy, India. So welcome. And it's a privilege and a personal honor for me to be across the table and have a conversation with you. So when we look at India in the last 9 years of Prime Minister Modi's administration, we see that the foreign policy has changed. Something different has happened, some transformation has happened. What is this transformation which signifies the administration of PM Modi?
Let me explain that at some length. But before I do that, I want to say, Dr. Patra, that you and I often talk in the House, in the Central Hall, and it's very good today that we are talking in front of the camera. I think in a way it tells a lot of people how members of Parliament relate to each other, and how we look at the world from our respective perspectives. So you asked me, saying really something has changed. What has changed? I would say perhaps the biggest change is the sense from Prime Minister Modi himself that foreign policy must be an instrument today to accelerate national progress and development. Now, it's not like previous governments didn't do that before, but the focus, the passion, the understanding that he has brought to it, the directness that he has brought to it is very much more. So, if you look actually at the last 9 years, you actually have projects like the bullet train collaboration with Japan.
Right.
You have some of the water technologies, for example, with some of the European countries, with Israel. You have environmental technologies with the Nordics. We just had a big semiconductor set of understandings with the United States. So, how do you go abroad, assess and appreciate technology? Also, how do you attract capital? How do you absorb best practices? So, I actually joke with people saying there's a Modi brand of tourism.
Okay.
That the people ask you saying, okay, after your program, what do you do?
Right.
Okay. So, the Modi brand of tourism is really go out there and see what's useful, what's relevant, what is a new learning, what is it you can take back to your country as a way of getting ahead. So, that's one. The second in a way is it's a very, I would say, people focused outlook. It's a people focused outlook within the country, that's a different subject. But why I mention people focused outlook is I think Prime Minister keeps dinning it into us. This is a globalized world. There are today 3.5 crore Indians and people of Indian origin who live abroad, and a lot of them work, a lot of them have settled down. The country benefits from it in many ways, not just remittances, but in a variety of ways.
True.
I mean, we today look at a global workplace.
Right.
Now, how do you run a foreign policy for that? Running a foreign policy for that really means if they get into trouble, for example, how do you quickly replace a passport?
Right.
They get into more trouble, cannot afford to deal with it, how do you have funds to support them? How do you make sure your embassies and consulates respond on a Saturday, Sunday or in the middle of a night? How do you look after people, especially those whose knowledge and confidence levels may not be that high, say blue collar workers?
True.
What are the arrangements you make for them? And we saw during COVID, or we saw during these operations like Ganga and Kaveri, if your students are stuck in Ukraine or your workers are stuck in Sudan, how do you then put in place an SOP so that the Indian system is there and they go out confidently in the world saying, okay, the government has our back. So, that's the second part of it. The third part of it is actually traditional foreign policy. Foreign policy is a contest, it's a competition. Any country which is rising like we are doing, there's a Newton's third law of international relations. For every rise, there's an equal and opposite resistance.
Right.
So, there will be some who will help you, but there will be many countries who will find ways of slowing you down. So, how do you maneuver through this space, and that's not something which is so easily done. The fourth aspect is really, it's not just a globalized world, it's also a single planet. So, the big issues of the planet, climate change, or you can say even issues like terrorism, how do we cooperate? And finally, I would say, Mr. Modi in many ways has a certain vision, not just of government and foreign policy, I would say even of country. He has a certain historic sense. I mean, we are, at least a 5,000-year civilization, again rising in the international order as a nation state today. So, how do we set in place policies, practices? How do we make sure the rest of the world appreciates our culture, our traditions, our history? How do you familiarize them with it? How do we become the mainstream?
Right.
That. So, I think all these today have combined to create a different narrative, and there's nobody better than Prime Minister Modi really to radiate that narrative, when he gets up there on the global stage.
True.
I think you get that sense India has changed.
How wonderful, Dr. Jaishankar. About the 4 or 5 pieces that you spoke about, it's really unique the way India has transformed under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi and under your able guidance as the Foreign Minister. One specific area about the Indian diaspora, you spoke about 3.5 crore Indian diaspora abroad. We find an infectious energy when you actually see the Prime Minister and you walking down the streets, and there's so much of galvanization of support and Indian flags flying. How has that happened? There's so much of Indianness that we see on the foreign lands, on the foreign streets. How does it reflect on you? What does it talk about the global India to you?
I was there at the inflection point, which was the Madison Square Garden event in 2014. If you remember, I was at that time the ambassador. And I'd actually come into Delhi soon after Prime Minister Modi assumed office. And we started planning the America visit. And he started, he brought up the subject of diaspora, and he said, we should think bigger. And normally we do a few hundreds, okay. So for us, thinking bigger is a few more hundreds.
Right.
Okay. I mean, it had never crossed anybody's mind to go bigger than that. And he sort of was very clear. I mean, and I still remember his saying that जो भी आप न्यूयॉर्क में करेंगी उसकी आवाज़ सबसे पहले वॉशिंगटन तक पहुंचनी चाहिए और उसके बाद it must reverberate around the world.
How wonderful.
So it was a challenge for us, because one thing is to do what you've been doing better, maybe bigger. This was a totally different league. Okay. And I don't say this to you as an event. What it did was it told the diaspora that look, here is a Prime Minister, here is a country, here is a government. They value you. You mean something to them. And and then he started in Madison Square Garden, then it went to Australia. I was not on that trip, I was still in the US as ambassador. And I remember the one in Wembley with the next year, because that was almost, I think, 75,000 people.
Wow.
Okay. And he said something out there which resonates even today with the diaspora, which was, he did that very typical. He said, ये passport का रिश्ता नहीं है, ये खून का रिश्ता है. So that sense of, emotion, attachment, value, that's really what has energized the diaspora. So what we have seen is their willingness today to do things. I must tell you, I have this huge tailwind today in the foreign policy. Wherever I go, it doesn't have to be United States, doesn't have to be UK. I was in Papua New Guinea with PM for the Pacific visit. And even in Papua New Guinea, influential Indians who were there came and said, look, what can we do, to strengthen this relationship? So we actually in a way had a very, I won't say casual attitude, but a very detached attitude towards people who went abroad. And in fact, many of them felt it,
Right.
I mean, the joke among them was that till Modi came, NRI meant not required India.
Oh, okay.
So it changed, once, because they personally felt from Modi that look, this man puts a value on us. He is proud of our success, and that then makes them want to be more attached to us.
How wonderful, Dr. Jaishankar. Really profound insights that we are getting from you. One of the key areas that we find, especially after you became the foreign minister, it was almost baptism by fire with you. You came in COVID-19 pandemic, then the Ukraine, Russia, then various international issues are happening one after another. Despite all of this uncertainty in the global scenario, India is emerging stronger. India is emerging more powerful. India is taking a lead on the high tables of international diplomacy. How did this happen? And what is the reasons that you feel that led to it, especially you as the foreign minister?
Well, I'll start with the least important and work my way up, if you will. For me, it wasn't it was a baptism by fire as a minister, but it wasn't a baptism by fire for the subject, you know. So, I mean, having done 4 decades, I was comfortable in the domain. Okay. Now, if I move up the order of importance, then you have a situation, you are absolutely right. I mean, if you look at it, we had 2019, we had the Article 370 issue. After that, we had the, you know, by the end of the year, the COVID concerns which started. Then we had the Chinese on the LAC, then the COVID in full flow, the Vande Bharat mission, the oxygen crisis, the vaccine Maitri, even in fact, one part of it is even getting the ingredients for vaccine manufacturing in India. So, and then we had the Ukraine, then we had Sudan. So it's, you're right. I mean, it's been a succession of that. But even if you are comfortable in the domain, I think what helped me very much when I became minister, had to deal with it, was the comfort and the experience of working with the Prime Minister, because all said and done, foreign policy is a domain where the Prime Minister has a very direct lead and inspiration, and in many ways understandably an oversight. So, because I had worked with him from 2015, that made it easier. But more than that, I would say I was enormously helped by both the, in a way, the kind of vision and attitude of the Prime Minister and his working style. So, what do I mean by that? By vision, I meant that he takes, you know, he takes a lot of interest in the world. He follows things a lot. He, you know, every time we meet or we have regular briefings, interactions. Because he understood the complications of this world we are sliding into, a more competitive world, one where, you know, globalization today is very questionable, many ways a very polarized world under great financial stress, trade disruption, climate action, terrorism. So, I mean, you have layer after layer. So, one was, if you have a PM who has that understanding, appreciation, and therefore thinks that through. The second was through the COVID period. You know, every time we would, in fact, we would meet as a cabinet or in small groups. His point was, look, we are not going to hunker down during COVID. You know, which most countries did. You know, they kind of closed the shutters and said, okay, we'll come out after COVID. His view was, look, this is a time to reflect, review, reform. Let's do big changes. Let's not come out of the COVID in a defensive manner, you know, bruised and battered. Let's come out, what are the things we should do, so that we come out of it much more confident. So, if you look, for example, on the economic side, you put in place a whole lot of reforms, including, you know, the whole changing, recapitalizing the banks. We came out with a much healthier financial situation. We created an enormous social welfare system during COVID by feeding, you know, 80 crore people and by doing Chandan payments to 40 crore people. We actually created a new digital society during COVID. So, now you would say, why is that relevant to foreign policy? It is relevant today because when I go out today, a lot of the world asks me, saying, is it true you did that? How does this work? Please tell us, you know. So, it has got us a lot of, in a sense, of respect. But there is also his working style. His working style is very much, you know, define the challenge, set it in context, give me the pros and cons, let's all debate it, you know, let's ask others who are relevant to it. But then you get clarity, you get a decision, you get a mandate. So, in a sense today as foreign minister, you know, it's very difficult for me to guess what other foreign ministers go through. What I can at least say, I have great clarity on my instructions, on my mandate, on the vision of my Prime Minister, of where my government is going. That gives me a lot of tactical flexibility in operating in the world.
How wonderful, Dr. Jaishankar. I would like to take you to a couple of specific questions. I mean, we've talked about the larger picture. G20 presidency. India is taking the lead. September, the world is arriving in New Delhi for the large summit. And as the foreign minister, you have a major responsibility there to play a part in terms of the entire G20. Over the last 1 year, how has India's perception transformed and grown because of the G20 presidency? And going forward, how is this G20 presidency, this experience, going to help us at the international frame?
Well, the G20 today faces a double problem. One is a north-south problem, north-south in terms of development. So, you would have as in Hindi the Viksit Desh, the Vikashshil Desh, and the problems are of growth, of development, of debt, of health, of sustainable development goals, of shrinking resources, of mounting pressures. So, this is one problem. The other problem is the East-West problem. East-West problem made very sharp by the Ukraine conflict, but that is not the only problem. I mean, there are other issues in the East-West. So, our responsibility today, certainly as the G20 presidency, but I would say beyond that, is how do we find a kind of create not just a consensus, but a solution in a way to these issues. Now, bear in mind the basic remit of the G20 is really to promote global growth and development. The G20 is not the UN Security Council. Its primary responsibility is not to deal with international peace and security, but international peace and security can affect growth and development, as we are seeing.
Very true.
So, how do we get the balance right? How do we carry the players? How do we find a common landing ground? So, some of it is diplomacy, some of it is still under progress, but some of it is also, there are broadly about 15 streams which feed today into, I mean, G20 is today 200 meetings, about 15 ministerials, pretty much all the interconnected aspects of growth and development are covered by the G20. What we do in G20 in energy, let us say, will feed into COP28. What we do in G20 in terms of sustainable development will feed into the SDG summit, which is going to take place next month. What we do on the finance track will be absolutely crucial for the future of the multilateral development banks. So, I want you to understand, I would like the viewers also to appreciate, this is not a 1-year exercise and just a set of meetings and then say, okay, we have now arrived at a package. Right. This is a hugely consequential body whose decisions and whose directions and whose debates will actually set the tone for pretty much everything big which is going to happen in the coming years, possibly in the coming decades. So, we have to work really a whole set of issues, then integrate it into a package, and then have the approval of the leaders when they come. So, that is one part of it. The other part of it, which I think has made our G20 presidency very unique, and this is again something I would say in all honesty I attribute it to the Prime Minister personally. His sense was, look, you people in the foreign ministry, you think international diplomacy means a conference center in Delhi.
Right.
Okay. That is the old way of doing it. That is the, that is a bureau, like an official way of doing it. I want to do it in a way in which the entire country feels we have stakes in G20, right, because it's such a big responsibility. And this should also give an opportunity for the world to get to know India. So, I use this phrase saying, look, the purpose, the whole G20 exercise, if you are doing 60 cities, if you are doing every state and union territory, the reason we are doing it is we want, in a sense, the world to be, as you say, India ready, to understand India, to know India. These are the most influential people in the world.
Right.
Okay. If these people have a better sense, if they go to Puri and Cuttack, for them today they will put Orissa in a visual which they would not have before.
Very true.
And similarly, for the people of, you could say, whether it is Srinagar or Coimbatore, wherever it is happening, they would have a sense also of what does it mean to have the world come at you.
Right.
And I must tell you, I've been hugely impressed by the enthusiasm with which every government, and this is not a political point, I would say some of the most enthusiastic governments are those which are ruled by non-BJP parties, non-NDA parties. And I think everybody is really given their best to this. So, we have done a great job so far. We still have a few months to go, but I am really proud that we have been able to make this into a truly national endeavor.
How wonderful, Dr. Jaishankar. In fact, these insights will help us and our viewers to better appreciate G20, because we look at it in a top-down approach. But the synergy and the spoken hub approach that you have provided about G20 will really help us to appreciate it better. I'd like to come to a specific aspect about Indo-US relations.
Sure.
Very recently, Honorable Prime Minister was there, you were there, and many such issues took place, many discussions happened. Honorable Prime Minister is probably the only Prime Minister who has addressed the US Congress twice.
Yes.
And
only Indian Prime Minister. Yes.
Only Indian Prime Minister who has done that. Now, in the context of that, and looking at Indo-US relations, in the 9 years we've seen a substantial transformation, a kind of bonding, because initially in the Cold War era, so to say, we were not really great friends, but in the last 9 years we've seen a tremendous amount of synergy emanating from both sides, relating to cross-border terrorism, relating to trade and commerce, science, energy. What has really transformed, and how has this happened, and what are the takeaways from such a relationship that has been built by the Honorable Prime Minister and you as the Foreign Minister?
Probably of all the important relationships that we have, the one I happen to be most closely associated with for a long period of time is that with the US. The first visit that I worked on, I didn't go for it, but I worked on it, was Indira Gandhi's visit in 1982. So, from there till this visit, I mean, I would have obviously missed a few, but when I reflect about those 40 years, I would say till now we would have said that the three big visits, impactful visits, were Modi in 2014, Dr. Manmohan Singh in 2005, the nuclear deal visit, and perhaps the Rajiv Gandhi visit in 1985, because he was trying to put that Cold War suspicion behind us. So, these would be like, in a sense, the benchmarks, if you would. When I look at this visit, I mean, this was clearly way above, and I'll tell you why. It's a very, very objective sort of conclusion which I'm putting to you. One, we came out, in a sense, out of the negative zone. If you look at all the earlier visits, it was, we and the US wanted to go forward, but there's obstacle A, there's obstacle B, there's obstacle C. So, all your attention is, how do I remove this, how do I deal with this, how do I build trust, how do I get you to like me, but we are still not ready to do serious things together.
Right.
This visit was that. So, if you look actually at the outcomes of it, I'm using a few examples.
Sure.
One big outcome was the jet engine, the G414 understanding. Now, it will probably surprise you. We first raised the G engine issue in 1986. That was when we made that first request. I have a picture of me as the youngest and the least relevant guy in a group with Dr. Kalam among other people in a delegation. Dr. Arunachalam led that delegation. where we actually went to the US in 1986 saying, why don't you look at this? Wow. And the reason why it didn't happen for 40 years is because very few countries part with jet engine technology. Jet engine technology is like the crown jewels of defense industry, because it's got so much technology concentrated in it. So you got to understand what a big jump today the relationship has made. Let me give you a second example. Today, the big issue is semiconductors. It's the chips. You see this. You would have seen that book, Chips War, and so on. Now, this time we actually had 3 agreements done, and by the way, one has already started to find its way on the ground, the Micron one. So between Micron, Applied Materials, and Lam Research, who are really like the brand names of that industry, for them actually to say, yes, we are convinced India is a good partner, the business conditions in India are right, the political comfort is there. So you actually had outcomes. And my sense is, for a long time, American business was very distrustful of India.
Right.
This time we saw something very different, from Elon Musk to Tim Cook, new industry, old industry, GE, Boeing. And the point you referred to, the address to the Congress. Look, the address to the Congress actually is a statement of it's an American political assessment.
True.
Of which leaders today are central to American thinking. So in a way, the invitation itself is a statement.
Absolutely.
And it's a bipartisan statement, because you have, remember, the president today is a Democrat, the speaker is a Republican. So I think there's a lot in this visit. My honest sense is it has really taken our relationship into a much higher orbit. And if I can come back to my first point, which was how does foreign policy today serve national progress? I think this visit has done a lot. Today you will see practical things which will help the Indian economy and in many ways directly contribute to areas like employment.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Jaishankar. I mean, we would have loved the conversation to go on and on. It's so wonderful listening to you. You get so immersed with your wide, wisdom, knowledge, and the depth of understanding that you bring. But alas, time is passing away, and we have to close our conversation today for another day when we'll take up more such conversations. Thank you so much for your time. It was a privilege listening to you, sir.
Well, thank you very much. I also enjoyed talking to you, and I think we'll have to carry this on in the Central Hall.
We should, sir. Thank you.
Absolutely. So the two of you can continue this conversation in the Central Hall. But Dr. Patra, thank you so much for bowling those wonderful questions. And of course, Dr. S. Jaishankar, thank you so much for batting those brilliant answers and giving us that perspective on India's foreign policy.
Thank you.
Well, viewers, that's all we had for you in this edition. Thanks for watching and stay tuned to Sansad TV. Goodbye for now from our side.